Hello, listeners. Do you want to be the very best that no one ever was? Well, then you're in the right place. This is episode 12 of the Avocado Games Cast, the Avocado's gaming podcast. I'm Merve, and today we'll be talking all about, you guessed it, Pokemon. We're going to be doing a deep dive into Pokemon Sun and Moon, the most recent entries in the franchise. But before that, let's meet the Poke Nerds who are joining me today. First up, he floats like a Butterfree and stings like a Beedrill. It's Lord Stoneheart.
Hello.
Next, he might be a Bunnelby or a Bunnery, but either way he puts the pun in low punny. It's the King of Rabbits, Wolfman Jew.
Hello, everyone.
And finally, she sings like Jigglypuff and... Sorry, I don't know what just happened. Anyway, it's Operetta.
Hi.
Alright, are you guys all excited to talk about Pokemon?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So you guys all know a lot about Pokemon. I don't know that much about Pokemon. I'm sort of familiar with it. Watched the anime when I was a kid. Played the trading card game a little bit, but I'm not really a huge Pokemon expert. So I'm going to be looking to you guys to teach me all about the mysteries of Pokemon.
Sure.
Can
That
do.
sounds wonderful. It's the 20th anniversary, or this year is the 20th anniversary of Pokemon. It's been kind of interesting, like thinking about the series and how it's evolved.
Yeah.
No pun intended.
Pokemon can vote now, which is pretty awesome. Pokemon's
In
almost
Japan.
able to drink in the United States.
Yeah. You really do not want to hear about Embor's thoughts on the economy.
I assume that Emboar is a Pokemon. If
It is.
came-
Emboar is the final evolution of the starter Tepig, which was a fire type in what was it, Unova?
Yeah, it was in Unova and Black and White. It's also my least favorite starter by a wide margin.
Hey,
Oh, wow.
I'm sorry, Piggy.
So, yeah, it came after the first 250. I probably don't know the name of that Pokemon.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if you guys start talking about like Pikachu and Cubone, I'll know what you're talking about.
Oh, we'll definitely be talking about Pikachu and maybe a bit about, Marowak, if not Cubone.
Mm-hmm.
All right, yeah, I heard that Marowak has a super dark Pokedex entry or something, or maybe Cubone has a super dark Pokedex entry in Sun and Moon.
Yep, and Marowak is actually typed differently.
Yeah.
As a regional variance, which I'm sure we'll dive into later.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
we'll get into that a little bit later. But before we get to pocket monsters in detail, I wanted to talk about the delightful celebrations of American consumerism that just happened, known as Black Friday and Cyber Monday. Did any of you guys pick up anything interesting on those couple of days?
I did.
What'd you pick up?
So after 3 years of refusing to bite the bullet, I finally picked up an Xbox One.
Nice.
Ooh.
What'd you get for it?
Specifically the Xbox One S, because that was the model that was on sale. It came with a 1 terabyte hard drive and a download code for Gears of War 4.
Nice. Have you been playing Gears of War 4?
I have a little bit. My main interest in the game is playing the Horde mode with my brother, who also has the game.
Yeah, it's a good way to with small number of players in co-op. It's a good way to sort of catch up with your friends. It's like Skype with guns. That's the way I see it.
That's a wonderful way to look at it.
Yeah, that's actually what I did with my friends from college. We'd play Left 4 Dead or Payday together, and we'd set it down to the easiest difficulty setting, so we could just relax and shoot the shit while shooting cops. Don't take that soundbite out of context, please.
Merv supports cop killing.
See, now that's a soundbite that you really don't want to take out of context. Only in video games. Anyway, did any of the rest of you pick up anything for Black Friday, Cyber Monday, etc.?
Not for a deal, but I did get The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. I haven't played that game for 11 years or so by this point.
Oh wow!
And so, yeah, I've been wanting to write about it actually for a while, and it's been really fun kind of diving in and remembering so much about it, and then realizing I've forgotten so much more. It's a really weird game, and I feel like we'll probably end up talking about it or on another podcast I'll be in, another Gamescast specifically.
Yeah,
But
and I feel like we'll probably touch on it tangentially somehow in this podcast because it is one of the darker entries in the Zelda franchise, similarly to how Sun and Moon are some of the darker entries in the Pokemon franchise.
yeah, it's a weird game. In some ways, it almost feels like a bizarre kind of deconstruction of not just Zelda, but like the idea of fantastical storytelling. Like the hero, all of his actions keep getting forgotten because he keeps going back in time. The only way he can solve these is by basically like stealing the identities of other people through these masks. It's like weird, it's creepy, it's surreal, and there's a sense of this unending tragedy in the story that I think is really compelling.
Yeah, that sounds very, very different from other entries in the franchise as well as other Nintendo games in general, which tend to be sort of bright and sunny. And it's interesting to see them take a darker turn.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So Operetta, I guess, did you pick up anything for Black Friday, Cyber Monday?
Nope. The closest thing was getting Dishonored 2 a few weeks ago on a 20% sale on Green Man Gaming. But that wasn't a holiday special or anything. I just really needed it after the election.
Yeah,
Has it
I
been
think we
good?
all needed video games after that election.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I picked up Dishonored 2 in the same deal. I've been playing through it recently. I'm very slow at that game.
Oh no, that's how it should be played. You should be, exploring things. Like I'm spending 2 hours on a mission. It's just fun.
Yeah, I think I'm 12 hours in and I've only played 4 missions or something like that.
That
I'm
sounds
really
about
slow.
right, yeah.
I just got out of, without spoiling anything, I just got out of the Inventor's Mansion.
Ah, geez, that thing was hellish, yeah.
Yeah, that turned out to be a bizarre level, but we can get into that at another time.
Mm-hmm.
I think what we want to talk about getting into right now is Pokemon. So you guys are, for lack of a better term, Poke nerds,
Sure.
if you'll excuse that terminology.
I'll
I
take
am
it.
not so much of a Poke nerd. I got, like I mentioned earlier, I was into it because my friends were into it when I was a kid, and you have to be what your friends are into when you're in elementary school, otherwise you won't have any friends. They're also super into Dragon Ball Z, which I wanted to call Dragon Ball Z because we were in Canada.
Did
And
people in
that's-
Canada not call it Dragon Ball Z?
No,
Like, I'm
we-
actually wondering.
No, we actually did call it Dragon Ball Z. But there are certain things growing up that I had a lot of trouble with. Like, for example, if there's something called like the Easy Sleep Mart, I didn't understand that pun. I always read that as EZ until I grew older, until I was like 7 or 8, and somebody explained to me, no, they say Z in the United States, not Z, and I found that really weird. Anyway,
like, that's kind of like Paul Haggis's classic television or classic failed television series EZ Streets.
ooh, yeah. Paul Haggis is,
Actually,
A Canadian
Easy
treasure.
Streets is supposedly pretty great.
pardon me?
Actually, Easy Streets was supposedly like a really good show that was considered like canceled before its time.
Well, I'll have to check it out at some point. Anyway, getting back to Pokemon, or actually Dragon Ball Z, that's like the one thing my friends were into that I resisted getting into. But anything that was sort of, because Dragon Ball Z just was awful to me, but anything that was sort of vaguely appealing, like my friends got into Pokemon, I got into Pokemon, friends got into Digimon, I got into Digimon. I got into it as well because, that's how friendship in elementary school works. So I did play a little bit of Pokemon, the trading card game, and I watched the anime, but I'm not really familiar with the video games. So I'm wondering what got you guys into Pokemon. For me, it was peer pressure, but I'm wondering what appealed to you guys about Pokemon, because
I
clearly
can
it's
start.
stuck with you. Sorry, Operetta, you were saying something?
Oh, I can start. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
I'd seen a few episodes of Pokemon anime. I was in grade school. None of my friends played it, but I had a coupon. Or my parents had a coupon for like a free video game rental at Blockbuster. And so my sister got a game. She got like the Shrek Game Boy fighting game, and a game called
Wait,
Pokemon
there's a
Silver looked pretty good.
There's a Shrek Game Boy fighting game?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Anyway, please continue with your Pokemon story.
Yeah, and so I was like, oh, is this Pokemon Silver? That the anime, that looks fun. I'll try that out. And that was my first exposure to games the only ones I felt because my sister and I both tried to play it and we kept overriding each other's data.
Yeah, gaming with siblings is a whole other story. What my sister and I used to do was the only gaming device we had was a PC, and we all wanted to compete for control of the computer. So we made a compromise where one of us would control the arrow keys and one of us would control everything else, and we'd play. We'd play at the same time.
Oh, that's fun.
Something like that actually happened once at a party I was hosting. We didn't have enough controllers for when we were playing Super Smash Bros. Brawl, so 2 people controlled one half of the controller.
I feel like that would work kind of well with ice climbers, maybe. But
No. Well, the problem is that you would need well, I mean, in theory, that the idea works conceptually, but those are like the hardest characters to use under normal settings.
Yeah.
yeah, anytime I've tried to use the ice climbers, they've just both died on me very quickly. Yeah, so Operetta, that's how you got into Pokemon.
Yeah. I eventually asked for the game. This is when the only Game Boy we had was my sister's. So we had to share. I didn't really understand the concept of only one save file per game. And so we tried to work around it by like getting some sort of like cheat device that let you have multiple saves. That didn't work. We returned to the store. And then my sister got Pokemon Gold. And he would, swap, we fight over, not really fight, but fight over, her Game Boy Color on road trips and who got to play their Pokemon game when, etc. We couldn't trade because we only had one Game Boy for a long time until I got a Game Boy Advance.
Oh, so you guys couldn't even use the link cables to trade Pokemon.
No, that was later. That was later.
Yeah. I remember it was the Game Boy Color that had that little NFC sort of thing where you could like trade gifts using
mystery gifts. I only did it
Gift
once, and it was with someone else's like sister's cousin's Game Boy.
Yeah, Nintendo's always managed to always add some strange hardware to their devices, and they've tried to sort of sell it through their games, and sometimes they succeed, sometimes they don't. I think the link cables were a good idea. This NFC communication thing never really caught on.
Well, it's kind of weird you mention that because like this is actually something kind of going into Pokemon history, is that like beforehand the Game Link cables were like painfully underused. Nintendo had this idea of like people being able to use them in conjunction, but there weren't like any games that really used it. Mm-hmm. And what ended up happening was that like Pokemon basically came up with this idea, and even before they had the idea of separate versions, the system always had this, or not always, but for most of the development for Red and Blue or Red and Green was included this element where you could trade with other people. Like from the beginning, they were interested in trading, and the idea of having 2 versions spun out of that because otherwise there's not really that much of a reason to trade.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That to sort of tie this trading thing to the whole catch them all ethos of Pokemon.
Yeah, the series has always been very much about communication and like working together.
Oh yeah. So for a long time, I mean, still going on, my sister would get one version and I'd get the other. We rarely got third versions. So I got silver, she got gold. I got white, she got black. I got sun, she got moon, for example. And so, we trade the version exclusives and etc. And just, not just that, but the recent, with the coming to the 3DS, just to be able to trade with anyone around the world, even just like, wonder trading. It's just, it's mind-blowing to child me. It's just amazing.
Yeah, because before you had to bring your device to the schoolyard and then trade up with some kids' Game Boy and their link cable. It was a whole thing, and now you can do it with anybody in the world. It's amazing to me as well. And I think it's super adorable that you still, even into adulthood, you and your sister still buy opposite versions of the same games so you guys can trade with each other.
Yeah, we had a discussion on who was getting what game. She was like, I like the bad, I want moon. I'm like, I wanted sun anyway. It worked out for the best because
guys, you need to fight about it.
Well, no, and also because clothing color, is one of the things that's different between two games, and my favorite color is red, and hers is blue, and Sun is the only one that has red naturally, and Moon has blue. So I'm like, go team!
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, Lord Stoneheart, how did you get into Pokemon?
So once again, this was a sibling thing. When I was 5 when Red and Blue came over to the States. And so between me and my brother, we just had Blue at first. And I think it worked. Like my brother shared a file, but I was not allowed to play that file. For a good chunk of time, I just started a new game and never saved it. And I would always start with Charmander, and it took me quite a while to realize how to like switch between Pokemon.
Ouch.
So Brock was a very interesting boss battle.
Yeah, you really want a Squirtle for that one, I'm guessing.
Yeah, Brock sucked with Charmander.
Yeah. Eventually at some point, my parents got me Red version. And I think there was a brief period of time where me and one of my older brothers did something similar to what Operetta and Assista did. But as of the DS era, I've been the only one in my family playing the games. Which does free up my choice in which one to get. But it's also nice that the DS era is what introduced online trading. So it's usually not too difficult to get the other version exclusive. So that's nice.
Yeah, it's nice that worked out the way it did.
Mm-hmm.
And Wolfman, how did you get into Pokemon?
I think like a lot of people, I'm 25, and I think like a lot of people my age, I was just kind of taken in by it is this omnipresent fad. The anime came out, the games came out, like it was all this one kind of giant thing. So I kind of stopped collecting the cards pretty quickly. I stopped watching the anime pretty quickly, but that's just because I was sort of, like a lot of people, it just kind of eventually kept going, and I didn't want to go with it. But I stayed with the games. I got Blue, and somehow I've ended up with all 3 original versions, not counting Green, the Japanese-only version.
So you mean Blue, Red, and Yellow?
Yeah. And after Crystal, which I kind of like stopped playing the franchise for years until Emerald came out. And then I ended up getting Emerald, reorienting myself in the franchise, and then I've been in here ever since.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like people sort of drop in and out of the franchise for sure. I never really got back into it because I never had a handheld console, but I suspect that if I did, if I were to go out and buy a 3DS, I suspect it's probably the first game I would get. Actually, yeah, for me, I also sympathize with sort of dropping out of the anime because I tried watching old Pokemon episodes recently, and they do not hold up. Not at all. It's such a bad show. And it's funny because I've been going back through sort of all these old series that I watched when I was a kid, and I watched Digimon. I tried watching Sailor Moon, and they still sort of held up, but Pokemon absolutely did not, and I was really sad about that. I assume the games though still hold up because people still play them to this day and still think they're awesome.
Yeah.
So at
Yeah,
least there's that.
Argue about, Gen 1 is the best or the worst, and there's discourse everywhere.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of who cares about anything beyond the original 150, and I'll admit to sort of falling into that trap because I don't really know anything beyond the original 150. I can name some of the Johto Pokemon, like I know what a Chikorita is, but if you were to ask me anything beyond that, it's just bits and pieces.
So I can't ask you whether Klefki is better than Carbink. It's Klefki, by the way.
I never even heard those two names before.
What about Magnum?
That's a condom brand.
No, that's how I pronounce the final evolution of Chikorita.
Magnum.
Meganium.
Yeah, see, that's how I pronounce it. Thing with Pokemon is it's pretty much all like written down, and so it's unless I'm like watching the anime and like I don't watch the anime, so I pretty much ignore what they say the quote official pronunciation is. Just go with what's in my head.
Magnum definitely sounds like it should be a steel Pokemon. If you're gonna call it a Pokemon Magnum.
It's Magnum, and then it evolves into Magnum Force, where its special ability is having the best movie theme ever made.
That's not how that theme goes. Anyway, yeah, so one of the few Pokemon I know from later in the franchise, I don't know if I've told the story in the podcast before, but I was living with a friend who was a roommate at the time, and one day I got home, and she was just like, "Come here right now," and she sounded angry, and I thought that I had like broken something in the apartment or set something on fire, and then she points to a laptop screen and says, "Look at this," and it's a drawing of a Pokemon. I'm like, "What is this?" She says, "This Pokemon is called Pidove. It's a pigeon and a dove mixed together. A pigeon and a dove are the same thing," and it made her furious.
I will say, Pidove is probably the least interesting of the generic bird, common regional bird.
I legit almost forgot it existed.
Yeah, the best is, of course, Staraptor, which is a bird that can kung fu you with its face.
I've always been partial to Zapdos because it sounds like a .com startup from the early 2000s. So my sister always used to call it Zapdos.com.
Just to be clear, when I say the regional bird, what I mean is there are a species. There's always one species of common bird that's
like Pidgey.
Like Pidgey or Spearow.
Yeah.
Not exactly. Spearow's sort of there, but it's in the first one it's Pidgey, in the second one it's Hoot Hoot. And it's always the one that kind of is just sort of like the most common in the area. In X and Y, it's Fletchling, which is turns into a giant firehawk.
That's awesome. I assume not as awesome as Moltres, but still pretty awesome.
They're on different levels. Moltres is a legendary.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so it's not a fair comparison.
No.
Speaking of legendary things, Pokemon Sun and Moon have a lot of legends in them, I think. Sorry, this is a bad segue, and I apologize. I tried very hard.
Okay.
But let's talk about Pokemon Sun and Moon.
Let's do it.
So they're the latest entries in the franchise. For those of you who aren't familiar with them, they're set in tropical locales, as opposed to the earlier entries in the series, which seem to be set in some sort of mixture of cave and forest.
It is set in Alola, which I affectionately refer to as Pokemon Hawaii.
It
looks
an
exactly like
Airsats
Hawaii.
Version of Hawaii, in the same way that X and Y took place in an Airsats version of France.
Yeah, so it's a very different sort of location from previous entries in the series. And the new sort of thing they've introduced is strange variants of familiar creatures. Like, for example, the Alolan Executor with the really tall neck that became an internet meme.
Giant palm tree.
Yeah, it's great. I love Alolan Executor. It also changes to being part dragon instead of part psychic.
I didn't even know there was a dragon type in the series.
Yeah, they've been around since Gen 1. They were broken as hell in Gen 1.
Oh wait, so like Dragonite was a dragon type?
Yes.
It was dragon flying. Yeah.
Okay.
So for the most, in up until in Gold and Silver, they were really rare. Because the Dragonite line was the only dragon in Red and Blue, and then the only one added in Gold and Silver was Seadra evolved into Kingdra, who was Water Dragon. Since then they've added
Many more.
Yeah, many more.
It's actually kind of similar to the ghost type. The only ghosts in Gen 1 were Ghastly, Haunter, and Gengar, and then they added a fourth one with Misdreavus, and then afterwards they added Sableye and Banette and Duskull, and
Nowadays, it's pretty much at least one new dragon type line per game.
yeah.
Well, that's good. They're still covering all their bases. I remember the types they introduced with Gold and Silver were Steel and Dark, which
Yeah.
didn't really exist before. And they made Onyx evolve into Steelix, which sounds really dirty. It sounds like it would pair well with Magnum. Um, anyway, so there are a lot of new critters in, or I should say, new variants of old critters in Sun and Moon. And
Yeah.
there's the Alolan Executor. There's also, we mentioned some of these have dark backstories. I think Cubone or Marowak has a dark backstory.
In the
Oh,
games, Meryl Cubone is this kind of like, I'm not even sure what, like, it's like a mammalian lizard that wears a mask of what's supposed to be, it's the skull of its mother, but you can also breed Cubones and its mother would be Marowak, and it wouldn't have, and she'd, like, not be dead, but I guess it could just say that it's its ancestor. And normally it evolves into Marowak, which is this basically like bone fighting monster that uses bones as clubs and boomerangs. And instead, in Alola, Cubone's Marowak is a fire ghost type. That's like a fire dancer.
As opposed to a ground type, which was originally.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
also there's also
I think
things
that's my favorite of the new forms.
Of the new type changes.
Yeah.
Yeah, another not exactly new Pokemon, or I shouldn't say not exactly old Pokemon. It is a new Pokemon, but that calls to mind an old one is Mimikyu.
I love Mimikyu.
Mimikyu's
Yeah, and that's
the best.
another
Oh
one
my
sort of a
God.
dark backstory, in that
Just-
it imitates Pikachu because it wants to be loved like Pikachu and hates
Yes.
Pikachu.
Or it doesn't hate
Yes.
Pikachu, but yeah, it's basically a weird deconstruction of the Pokemon franchise, and especially of like not just Pikachu's popularity, but the idea of what's the fans call Pika clones. Basically, every generation they have a Pikachu-esque like electric rodent. In Ruby and Sapphire, they had Plusle and Minun, who were based around positive and negative energy. In Diamond and Pearl, it was Pachirisu, who at one point took the competitive world by storm in a fantastic. Do you remember that Operetta?
Yeah, that's what I'm laughing at. Pachirisu is a flying squirrel.
Yeah, or it's a normal squirrel, and Emolga in Black and White's a flying squirrel.
Yeah.
I think they tried that also with Gold and Silver with Meryl. I think.
Yeah, Meryl is kind of the first one, but it's often not counted because
It's a water type.
yeah, it's definitely outside of Mimikyu, Meryl is the best of all the Pika clones.
Yeah,
Well,
they
I
definitely
love-
tried to make Meryl happen, and people were having none of it.
I disagree. I think people still like Meryl.
People
I like
really?
Meryl.
Okay. I don't see pictures of Meryl on the internet anymore, but again, I'm not really immersed in the Pokemon fandom.
No,
So-
but I love Mimikyu. It has like a 5% encounter rate where you encounter it. And so when I finally ran into one, I was like, there it is! I caught
Yeah.
one and I named it after the Reverse Splash.
Yeah, I spent like an hour trying to catch one, and I'm so glad I did. It's so fun.
Yeah, I heard Mimikyu's sort of and take us to the anime. Mimikyu's sort of working with Team Rocket now in the anime or something weird like
I
that.
believe it's one of the Pokemon that Team Rocket captured. Like they
Yeah.
always have, like everyone in the anime always gets like Pokemon from that region, and so theirs is Mimikyu, which sort of works as like as a counterpart.
Okay.
Mimikyu like wants to murder Pikachu in the anime. And in the games, he's like, oh, it just wants to be loved. I love you, Mimikyu.
They actually had a the people who made the games actually had like a pop song released that's sung from the perspective of a Mimikyu who wants to be loved.
Oh god, it's so dark. He wants to be loved, but he can't get the love, and then in the anime, he eventually turns to wanting to murder Pikachu.
Yeah.
It's
Oh lord.
it's also great too because it's got like a stick instead of its tail. It has like it uses a stick.
Like, is it a jagged sort of stick so it looks like the lightning bolt too?
No, it's literally just a piece of wood.
It's
Yeah, but it
a
is
straight
jagged.
stick.
No,
Oh,
no, no.
it-
It has like the lightning bolt.
It looks like
Okay.
Pikachu's tail. But no,
Yeah.
it's not even an electric type. It's a ghost fairy type, but it can learn like Thunderbolt and Thunderwave. But I'm sitting there laughing my head off. I'm like, I love Mimikyu. I never used it because I already had the ghost type and a fairy type on my team. but I
Yeah,
love it.
I had my starter.
So you've
was
sent
Ghost,
him to
so-
sent him to Professor. Is it still Professor Oak? It's a different Professor Oak,
No,
right? In this game?
I didn't
Different
send him
region.
anywhere. He's happily in my box, hanging out on the Pokepelago Islands. He's happy.
Okay, but I just wanted to ask. So, in this new game, there's always a Professor Oak or some variant on Professor Oak. In this game, I've heard it's Professor Oak's cool, swarthy cousin.
That is wrong.
There's actually two professors. Oak's cousin Samson is he's there, but the main professor is Kukui, who is a kind of bro-y Hawaiian biologist who also who basically his research mostly seems to consist of him disguising himself as a secret famous pro wrestler.
He also
What?
wears no shirt. He also wears no shirt under his lab coat, even
Yeah.
when it's freezing out.
That is a hazard, but I'll let it slide.
He's one of the more fun. He's like one of the more active / fun Pokemon professors in a while. And I'm saying this is someone who really liked Professor Sycamore. I'll cop to that.
Okay. Is he in the anime as well, or is it
I
just
assume so.
They're always in the anime, yeah.
Yeah.
okay?
They always
So
have like Oak and the one professor, except Elm, who I think didn't really show up that much because there were some kind of really weird like production issues going on in the Johto years in the anime.
yeah, because I remember before they got to Johto, they did this whole arc
Orange Islands,
on these
yeah.
made-up islands that never appeared. Orange Islands, yes,
Yeah.
that never appeared in the game, and it seems like now they're going back to the Orange Islands, but in the video game almost.
It's a bit like that. Actually, it's kind of interesting because this is the first of the main games where they threw out the gym system.
And the
Instead-
HMs.
Yeah, there's no gyms. Instead, it's what's called the Island Challenge, where you go through a set of challenges that reflect the history and culture of each of the islands. And then you fight like a leader who's like the kahuna of each island. And it's sort of closer to what the Orange Islands was like.
It's more fun than the gym system, honestly. It feels
Oh,
feels
hell
really
yeah.
organic.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a more interesting system, even if they just need to vary up what they've been doing with the mechanics a little bit, just to keep things fresh.
Yeah. The other big thing is there's no more HMs, so you don't have to carry around a Pokemon that knows like strength and surf and fly and everything. It's all separate. You just call Pokemon to do it. It's amazing. It's the first time I haven't used a water Pokemon on my team in like ever.
Although,
I
to
love
be fair, they also do have a lot of pretty great water types and some good water moves. Like,
So-
I think one of my favorites is Galisopod, a giant, like, isopod kickboxing warrior monk.
Which gets scared which switches out automatically if it gets below half health because it's scared.
So is it like a slug sort of
No,
thing?
it's an isopod, like
It evolves from a slug though, kind of.
the original form is called Wimpod, and its like power is the same. It moves out when it has 50% health because it's called, it's a wimp. And then when it evolves, its ability is exactly the same, but it's called Emergency Exit.
That's pretty
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, so they've got this new island challenge system, which is a first for the franchise. What else has changed compared to previous entries in the franchise?
The Pokédex is segmented because there's one for each island, and also along with and a collective one as well, and which is nice. It's
Yeah, also
so
your
Your
Also, your
Pokédex is a
Pokédex is
Pokemon,
haunted.
right?
yes,
So there's this Pokemon called it was introduced in the Diamond and Pearl. It's called Rotom, like Modus spelled backwards. He's electric. Well, he's a weird Pokemon because he's like electric ghost type. But like his and then in later games, like they introduced he can
basically
essentially take control over machines like a poltergeist. And so the explanation for your Pokédex is that someone developed a Pokédex that Rotom can get into, and you can't ever use the Rotom in battle, but he also serves to like give you advice and like give you like a reminder on where to go next. And
Okay. I've heard in the anime he's also super sassy.
I assume as much.
He is in game too.
Okay.
Yeah,
So-
he makes like comments making fun of you, and then like it's basically like a wacky video game sidekick, but he's also your dictionary
Yeah.
or your encyclopedia.
And shows you exactly what patches of grass Pokemon spawn in, which is super nice.
Yeah, that's actually one thing that's super great is it's easier to not get lost because the Rotom Pokedex will actually tag like where you're supposed to go. So if you like kind of get lost or something, you can always kind of look back on that. The
Is
other
it
thing
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say though, the other thing, or what I think is the most important thing that's changed, is not so much a mechanical system, or I guess in a way it is so in X and Y, the series moved to 3D, but it was still largely on a 2D plane. Like, characters were a little bit more like... It was almost more like they were 2D, but in, like, it's almost like a half 3D environment.
Like
This one is fully
also the
fledged...
camera's the camera's sort of from above. It was almost quasi-isometric.
Yeah, and that's what's kind of interesting is about this one, is that, like, it isn't. So the islands, like, they're not arranged the way the islands in the earlier games used to be. They actually feel like these contiguous islands. Like, there's a part, like, the roads actually feel like real roads. And because of that, I think it's done a lot to make Alola feel like this very unique, lived-in, and much more cohesive environment than the previous generations. Like, there's a real sense of its culture and its history that you explore through the games.
I fully agree. There's one part where you can take a bus up a hill. And so I did, and I was like, I'm going to walk down this hill. And I was like walking down like where the bus went, and there's like patches of grass, and it's like walking down a mountain. I was like, this is amazing.
Yeah, it felt like an actual road.
Yeah.
It's amazing what you can do just by adjusting the camera angle to help for the immersion.
Yeah, and there's another part where the one where you are introduced to Mimikyu is you go to this abandoned mini-mart. But the whole backstory that you find out is that it was originally supposed to be like this giant, this commercial center for one of the islands, but then the local god of the region, Tapu Bulu, or Buru, basically was so insulted that it destroyed it by like basically smashing it to pieces with logs. And so
vengeful anti-commercialist god.
Yeah, and they were building it on its land. And so that
makes more sense.
Yeah, there's another thing is that like the legendaries, the main ones, there's a guardian of each island that's sort of like this, almost like moe statues, these little fairies that their limbs basically form shells, and they actually like regularly interact with the islands, which is really interesting.
Yeah. And speaking of scenery and stuff, I've actually been to Hawaii, and it was when I was, it was back when I was still playing Ruby and Sapphire, so it was probably when I was like 12 or 13. And so I've had fun recognizing places that are obviously inspired by real places in Hawaii. Like there's a garden, like Maui Garden on one island. I took like 2 steps into it. I'm like, I've been to the place that this was inspired on. There was one place that rains all the time. There's a place in Hawaii called Hilo where it rains a lot. And there's volcanic parks and reminiscent of places I've been where the lava literally ran across like the road and it's just lava now. And it's just, I've had a good time with that. The environment feels, as we discussed, more lived in and organic than in past Pokemon games. Like I've been to France too, and I had fun in Pokemon France, but this is just, it feels better.
Yeah.
Do you know if they did location scouting for this game at all?
Oh, they almost
I'd be
did.
shocked if they didn't. They definitely did.
I mean, if you actually look at like the comparison of the islands of Alola to various islands in Hawaii, like I think there's a part where the professor's lab is in the exact same place as like the high school President Obama went to.
I don't know what sort of political statement that is, but
no, but it's very much like but it's like there's very clear like inspiration based on like where the environment is, and I think that carries over based on this vision of Hawaii as this like ecological epicenter, so where biodiversity is just super huge, and that carries over in the games, where you have the Alola forms and these very crazy new Pokemon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, from what I've seen, it looks like they have a lot of these lush, verdant jungles in the game that you don't sort of see in a lot of other games.
Yeah.
There's a few, yeah.
There's actually one great part where one of the trials you have to go and investigate this like pool during the rain, not like a man-made pool, but like a water pool in this like collection of them, and it starts to rain and you go down and it's like, and you keep having to explore, and eventually you meet one of the coolest Pokemon in the whole series, or one of in this generation, Wishy-Washy.
It's a fish.
Which is
That's really its name.
It's really
Wishy-washy.
It's a sardine, but it's kind of like the new form. It's like the new Gyarados. Basically, it starts out as this tiny, crappy sardine with the worst stats in the entire series. But when it hits level 20, its ability sets in. Abilities are these more like innate, passive things that Pokemon have. Like Pikachu's is static, so there's a chance that you can be paralyzed if you touch it. Wishy-Washy's is schooling, and what it does is, as long as it has more than 25% of its health, it can summon in dozens of other Wishy-Washy to turn into this gargantuan killer whale monster made out of itself.
Its stat spike. It's amazing.
Yeah, has some of the better stats than many legendaries.
That sounds awesome and also terrifying.
And you're introduced to it by like fighting a few individual ones, and then it's raining and you're on a Lapras, and then suddenly it bursts out of the water. It's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this game seems that it has a lot of these memorable moments that that a lot of previous entries in the franchise sort of playing it all sorts of melts together. But here it seems like there's a lot of these moments that are very memorable, that are very easy to relate to others.
It's a much more cinematic game than previous entries, for better and in some ways for worse.
Yeah, like the player character just pretty much stares off into the distance and doesn't react to things. But there are a lot of some nice cinematic stuff. At times it's a little bit too heavy on the cinematic stuff, but it's in a good. It works overall.
Yeah. Sometimes it's really cool though when you like see a character being harassed by a gang of Spearow, and it's like, oh wow, they're actually using the real Spearow models that you see in the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, whereas if they wanted to do something like that in, say, the original Pokemon, it would just be a guy standing there, and you go up to him and talk to him, and he'd say, I'm being harassed by Spearow, but you can't actually see the Spearow.
Yeah. Like, it's kind of weird when you're, like, watching, you're being like, okay, this is kind of bizarre to see this game where you're kind of like Gormless little avatar character is interacting with this weirder, complex world.
I feel like that's sort of a problem that a lot of JRPGs have, where the player character is a blank slate. So you have this silent character who goes up to people who have very lengthy, one-sided conversations. So I don't know if Pokemon Sun or Moon are immune to that.
I mean,
Well,
doesn't really count.
Sorry, Lord Stoneheart, you were saying something?
So yeah, I think they do sort of. I'm trying to think how I want to put this. So in this one, they made a step forward a little bit with like sometimes your character does sort of get usually just between two dialogue choices, and they sometimes do allow for a little bit of like to give personality to your character, where like none of the previous entries really did that. Because I did kind of think, when possible, I did make my character a little bit sarcastic, but because of there's not really much like the avatar character doesn't really get much in terms of like facial expressions or like facial reactions, so it is a bit of a flaw there. So it's a step forward for the franchise, I think, but it's still sort of not up to speed with some other RPGs.
Yeah, they could definitely push it a little farther with the right facial animations, perhaps voicing the characters. I mean, obviously, it's a handheld game, so they're not going to voice characters for the most part.
It's a kind of a little bit like the Paper Mario games where like they give you two dialogue choices and they don't actually change anything, but sometimes you'll get like a slightly different answer.
Yeah, I see that more as expressive choice than as choice that has actual narrative impact.
But
Oh,
yeah,
yeah,
that's
okay.
what it is. It's expressive choice. But I will gladly take that. I'm not complaining because one of the things that this game brought back and improved on from Pokemon X and Y was character customization. There's like 4 different skin tones. You can be black in this game. You've got a little bit of a range of hair colors and styles and clothing. I mean, you're not going to be wearing suits. You're just mostly, variations of
Sad for me.
shirts, shorts, and skirts. But there's a fair amount of variety, and I've had lots of fun. And instead of spending all day on Pokeballs, I generally spend it on clothing. But
Yeah,
it's nice. You those 3 hours before I reached the first shop and hair salon, I was like, okay, this person looks vaguely like myself. Once I, got clothes and like a haircut and different eye color via contacts, I was like, there it is. There's me on the screen. I mean, I'm a white girl, but so anyway.
See, that's the frustrating thing for me, Operetta, is that because these games have you play as a 10-year-old, there's no options where you can just basically have a giant Jufro and a beard.
True.
Or a suit.
Could you
for that
create
matter.
yourself at 10, though?
I mean, I actually started to have a mustache at 10.
Oh, wow. Yeah, mine started at like age 12. I got, the Indian genes. But yeah, I'm actually always happy to see that these character customization options are there. Because most of the time it's, being not white, it's really hard to customize a character that looks even remotely like me in a video game. So it's always heartening to see that doing something like that is possible. Also, is it possible to change, like, they have different hats and stuff as well?
Yeah.
Because they're the default female trainer in the game has like this really doofy hat.
The chicken hat. Yes,
Yeah,
you
the
can
chicken-
change hats. You can wear no hat. You can wear like a flower in your hair instead, etc.
I'm actually kind of frustrated. I still haven't figured out how to learn how to take off my hat.
You just select it in the menu, and it'll take it off.
Oh wow, I think
I
I
had no
might
idea.
actually do that for the. Oh,
See, I had to learn how to do that because hats and hair accessories are 2 different categories that don't overlap. If you want a hair accessory, you have to take off your hat. And I like walking around with the hibiscus flower in my hair. So.
Oh, so you can't wear a hat and a hair accessory at the same time?
Correct, because your hat's going to be covering your head. Although I have a nice hat with a flower on it, but that's beside the point. It was expensive.
I mean, you could, in real life, you can wear a hat over a hair accessory. People just won't see it, but it's there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Pokemon.
You want to
is
express
still
yourself. I
working
get
on
it.
Pokemon has always kind of slowly evolved, which I think is kind of neat, to be honest.
Mhm.
Like, it's always kind of slowly pushed itself a little bit at a time. And I think that's, for me, at least, one of the big appeals of the series, is seeing it, like, slowly evolve in what it's saying or what it's doing. Like, I think even the stuff of the customization is kind of central to a lot of Pokemon, because a lot of that, because you basically, the way you play the game is essentially by choosing which Pokemon you use. Like, if you want to play through the game with the Nuzlocke challenge, which is where you only catch the first Pokemon in a route and you get rid of them each one that faints because you treat it like they're dying, you can do that. Like, if you wanted to play the game based entirely around a single type, you could also do that. And I think it's one of the things that's really exciting about the franchise is in how it plays with things like that.
I feel
So you
like
can pet your Pokemon. It's great.
I feel like the new entries are dark enough that maybe permadeath actually feels like it would be appropriate.
Yeah.
For
I mean, I don't
something
think they're that dark. It's still a Pokemon game. But if you want to play it that way, I mean, go for it. No one's stopping you.
I mean, they're definitely having fun with the darkness, although it's, like Operetta says, incredibly relative.
Yeah, Pokemon sort of operates on a sliding scale. It's always going to be a game that is targeted towards children.
Which is understandable. And anyone who complains that it's too, not dark enough is just kidding themselves.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it is. I mean, it is. I shouldn't say it's just for children. It is supposed to be sort of this all ages game that both
It is.
kids and adults can enjoy together. So it is. It is never gonna go. You're never gonna tell like a really dark story about I don't know, great detective Pikachu investigating some horrific serial killer murder. Um, but you are gonna get sort of these allusions to darker ideas and things like death and tragedy that you wouldn't necessarily see in another kind of kids game.
You do get that like you get like there's this one really weird part in where you go to a grave and you talk to a woman who talks about how her husband was killed by someone speeding on, like riding on a Pokemon who didn't notice him, and then she gives you a TM and then she leaves.
Yeah, it seems like almost like these games treat tragedy very matter of factly. Like it's just something that comes up, and it doesn't become this big thing that reverberates throughout the game. And I
Yeah.
feel like that's sort of like how tragedy is in real life. You hear these sad stories, and it's not to say they don't affect you at all, but you hear them, and then life keeps going, and you're on to the next thing.
Yeah, it's pretty much
Yeah,
what it is.
it would be weird for me to call Pokemon a science fiction series, but in a way, it kind of is. It not in the sense that it's always been a very lighthearted series, but one that's always kind of interested in what a society would look like that was different. Like they've said before, like that if there's these Pokemon and like racism and like climate change wouldn't exist because people would kind of learn to live with these creatures and they'd all kind of work together. And so it's like not it's more it's I don't want to say it's like speculative science fiction. That's not really its aim, but it always has kind of that way of looking at the world. And so death is like not the primary a fear of death is not the primary motivation or the primary danger. It's usually in like people exploiting that world or exploiting how Pokemon live.
I've always sort of found that setting appealing for lack of a better word, speculative fiction, because a lot of speculative fiction, science fiction, is very dystopian, and there's been some great dystopian fiction over the years. Don't get me wrong, but all too often, dystopia is a shorthand for, is just a generic shorthand for oppression, and there's not really much depth there because we've seen these stories hundreds of times before, and all that has to be said about it has been said. But what's really interesting to me is setting up a society and making it more or less work, and then introducing challenges into it. So it's not a utopian society. There are problems with it, but it's generally a society where things work, and then people have to deal with whatever problems arise.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting to introduce these hypotheticals, like how would a criminal organization operate in the world of Pokemon, like say Team Rocket or Team Skull or whatever the villains
That's the
are.
new, yeah.
Sorry,
I
who are
guess-
the villains in Sun and Moon?
Well, I think this is actually kind of good, this entire discussion, including the villains, because I think it's probably, we might want to talk about some of the plot stuff.
Yeah, sure. So just for my edification, who are the villains in Sun and Moon? Is it still Team Rocket or is it somebody new?
No, there's actually kind of 3 villains, and we're kind of going into spoiler territory, but I think it's fine, everyone.
Okay, yeah, we can do some mild spoilers. As long as we're not spoiling like huge late game plot points. I think
Sort of.
from now on,
It's a
mild
decent
spoiler
plot
warning.
point.
Pardon me?
It's a decent plot point. That's the thing.
Okay, well, we'll spoil it. It's fine.
Okay.
So the main villains, in theory, or the way the game starts, are Team Skull. They're this, like, hapless group of gangbangers. Their leader is amazing. He's a guy who basically dresses in a Russian tracksuit and has giant sunglasses of his own team's logo, and he trains bug types. That Isopod Warrior Monk I mentioned, that's his team leader.
And his catchphrase is, "It's your boy Guzma."
Yeah, he's
That's amazing.
and
It
he's, and so like most of the time they're kind of
He
just like
sounds like so many people I knew back in middle school. Anyway, sorry, continue.
Team Skull is great. They try to steal a bus stop just cause at some point.
yeah
Like,
they,
literally just take the sign out of the sidewalk and
no they
take it
fail
with
to
them?
do that because it's a really heavy bus stop sign.
Yeah, the sign's too heavy for them. They can't do it. They try though.
And so this is like, they're really fun, they're super lighthearted, and it's like very clear that there's an affection for them that like some of the other teams didn't accrue as much. Like
Okay, so they're like Jesse and James from the anime.
they're very clearly like they're very clearly not seen as overtly villainous in the way that Team Flare, who was like Scientologists mixed with objectivists who were trying to blow up the world because it wasn't beautiful enough. And the only people who were going to live were people who ponied up like hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, that's not that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like a mixture of, just like you said, Scientology and objectivism and that cult that killed all its members in South America.
Yeah. But then it turns out that Team Skull, like, there's a really creepy section later where you go to this town that they've basically taken over and it's now abandoned. And it's this super creepy town that's full of their graffiti and stuff is like strewn about everywhere. And then it turns out that they're being funded by a group called the Aether Foundation, who are officially like Pokemon conservationists. But it turns out that their leader, she's like kind of completely insane.
Okay, so they're like the in-game stand-in for the Koch brothers? I don't know.
Well, I mean, it's more like she's become obsessed with the third villains of this, the Ultra Beasts, who are Pokemon from a Lovecraftian alternate dimension. And their universe is so bizarre that even though these are normal Pokemon, like they're not legendary in their own universe, they're considered legendary in our universe.
This is getting to some Digimon Tamers territory here.
There are wormholes and other dimensions.
Yeah, you literally go through.
This is very Digimon Tamers.
Yeah, it's amazing. The main one is this like very creepy, faceless, eyeless jellyfish creature that looks kind of like a young girl, but if she was a jellyfish made of glass. There's like a crazed mosquito made of blood sac like muscles, an electrical, like a bunch of electrical wires centered around a crystal for a head.
It's fun.
Yeah, these all sound scary for sure. I don't know if kids are going to handle that really well.
We'll include pictures when we do like the link dumps for the article.
For sure.
And so the boss, Lucamine, like she's become obsessed with trying to discover like the secrets to the Ultra Beasts, and because of that, she's become like this weirdly abusive, controlling like lunatic who freezes Pokemon in cryogenic storage and builds like bizarre chimeras. One particular new Pokemon is a chimera called Type Null.
Okay, this is literally the plots of Digimon Season 2 and Digimon Season 3 mixed together.
Yeah, and eventually you chase her to the Lovecraft dimension, and she fuses with Nihiligo, the jellyfish girl creature, and
Pokemon can fuse with people now?
Well,
hey, that happened in Gen 1 too, Bill.
Yeah, Bill in Gen 1, there's an homage to The Fly where the guy who makes the PC system fuses with a Rattata in a teleporter accident. But
man, Pokemon is so much scarier than I thought it was.
It does.
I mean, it's also fun. It's not like doom and gloom. It's just like, all right, let's roll.
And it does end a lot better than The Fly ended.
Yeah.
But that's kind of just what Pokemon is like. It's like the dark stuff it's never like hidden. It's very it's like there's always those like clickbaity articles like the secret, like the dark secret of this Nintendo game, but it's like Pokemon's always been okay with that. Like it doesn't hide it.
Yeah, it's like sure there's a Pokédex entry where it says that one Pokemon likes carrying off kids but leaves the fat ones behind because they're too heavy. There we are, it's there.
What?
No, well, actually, to be fair, there are other entries where it says that Drifloon is too weak to carry off kids, so it doesn't. And then Drifloon doesn't really seem into that. It more protects kids.
Yeah. But it's possible, and if you see Gengar, it could be coming to it could be coming for you. You can't escape, etc. It's just like
the Gengar's Pokedex entry in this one literally ends with the sentence "Give up." And so
they're really trying to give the children nightmares.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, there's one Pokemon that does the opposite. It's like a Chinese dragon based on the stereotype of a wacky old man.
It's called Drampa.
Yeah,
like Dragon Grandpa.
And every time I look at it, it reminds me of Mace Tyrell from Game of Thrones. Like this kind of ridiculous, doddering old man with a mustache.
I mean,
if I knew anything about Game of Thrones, I would be able to see the comparison.
If you did, you would absolutely see the comparison. We'll include that picture too.
I mean, not to imply that this game is all doom and gloom and, horrific Pokédex entries. It's as said, still a relatively, lighthearted journey. You help this girl, Lily, become more confident in herself, and you're helped along the journey by your friend Hao, and it's just I mean, not to imply that it's horrific things. It's just it's got the normal Pokemon going on an adventure, everything's gonna be okay thing as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of these fun characters who sort of evolve with you. Lily is one of Lucamine's kids, along with Gladion, who's this Team Skull enforcer who's stolen one of the type Nulls, and eventually they grow together through the power of friendship.
Yeah, the power of friendship seems to be a recurring theme in the franchise, for sure.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's a good one.
Yeah, and not just in the game itself. That's like how the trading works. You have to have, or you don't have to have friends, but it's usually the best if you have people to trade with whom you can trade Pokemon.
Yeah, sometimes you can do it with random strangers. Like a dude traded me its Magmar to evolve it, and I could have kept it, but I gave it back because I figured, dude, I wouldn't want someone taking my evolved Magmar.
Yeah. There was one time, where I, earlier this week I traded with a total stranger on the AV Club who wanted a Water Stone because he wanted to evolve his or her Vaporeon, and so I traded. Because I was later in the game, I was able to buy one and then trade it to it, and I got a shiny Spinda, which is like a crappy panda where all of its spots are different depending on the version. But it was still cool, and I'm glad the person got the Water Stone they needed, and I'm glad I got a cool little shiny Pokemon.
Yeah, there's even like a general unspoken etiquette among people who you literally can barely communicate with online that, if you trade Pokemon with someone, they evolve, then you offer up the Pokemon they gave you to trade it back.
Yeah.
Of course, I ended up losing my legendary in the game because some jerk who did not abide the etiquette. But that's okay because I got another one because some guy in the GTS really wanted to fly on.
Yeah.
So.
Speaking of which, at some point we'll probably want to trade
of course.
our Cosmog or whatever our Cosmog turns into.
I've already got a deal with another friend for that because what Cosmog evolves into depends on what game you have.
Yeah. Okay.
It evolves into the box legendary.
Is Cosmog a space gear?
No,
it's a Nebula Pokemon. It's a cutie pie.
Yeah, it's so basically, Merve, during the game, Lily, the daughter of the president, she meets you. You don't know she's the daughter yet because her mother's been trying to force open a portal into the Ultra Beast world. So the way to do that is to use the sort of the god of the region, either Solgaleo, who's like the lion of the sun, or Lunala, the bat of the moon. And so both of them, though, actually evolve. They're legendaries, but they evolve from this one Pokemon called Cosmog, which is this really adorable little psychic type, basically cloud of
Nebula.
Yeah, like space something dust, I guess. And then it turns into a cocoon called Cosmoem, which is like a cosmic embryo, and then it becomes the box legendary. And that's actually what happens over the story of the game is you meet you and her friend Cosmog, and eventually Cosmog evolves, and then finally it becomes the legendary, and you have to catch it.
Yeah,
you get another one in post game.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it sounds like they've managed to to craft an interesting story arc around Cosmog, etc.
I mean, it's still Pokemon. It's still like you're not getting like Chrono Trigger or whatever, but it's still good. It's
as far as Pokemon plots go, it's one of the stronger ones.
Yeah.
They do a good job with the characters, and like, you know, they're generally good characters. You feel a connection. I mean, I did. But,
oh, definitely. And the villains are fantastic, particularly Skull.
It seems like a shift from, especially the very early entries in the franchise, which, mind you, I've played maybe a few hours of Blue and I think 4 or 5 hours of Silver. I don't remember any characters from either game.
Yeah.
And now it seems like they've made an effort to make characters and narrative a big part of the game.
Yeah.
Going forward in the franchise.
It's really fun. There's one character, he's like a dark type trainer, and he's like this kind of lame, kind of crappy cop who's failing to keep order in the island that he runs. But he's he's secretly got a heart of gold.
He's just old and tired of shit.
Oh, okay.
And then you find out his like tragic, his not super tragic backstory, but his sort of dramatic backstory. Yeah. Where he was in Interpol, and Interpol is also in the franchise, by the way.
International Pokemon Police.
The International Police. There's this guy called Looker who shows up in the game. I think he's meant to be like a vaguely foreign. I think he's supposed to be French.
No, I think he was. I think he popped up originally in Black and White 2, which I did not play. And then he popped up again in X and Y.
Sorry, Stoneheart. Where did he pop up?
Sorry, I know. So he first popped up in Platinum. And he didn't really do much in Platinum, so it was a little strange. But I think like in each game he's supposed to come across as like vaguely foreign. And the one game where he doesn't speak with some sort of what the character seems to make a foreign accent, like the one where his dialogue comes across as
more
not
naturally.
an accent is X and Y, which I think means he's supposed to be French.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
he's multilingual.
Yeah, and he's this kind of like, he looks a bit like David Tennant in Doctor Who.
Or Detective Gumshoe in Ace Attorney.
Yeah, even more so Lupin the Third.
Yeah.
There's even a Pokemon.
Does he have the same sort of personality, or? I'm somewhat familiar with Lupin the Third.
Okay, so can I jump in real quick?
Please.
There's a Pokemon in this game that's kind of like one of the common Pokemon you find throughout the game, and its evolution are supposed to be like, you know, a stereotypical Japanese detective, but the poor thing looks more like Donald Trump than anything.
Yeah, it's pretty sad for Gumshoes.
Yeah.
Oh no.
I know. I'm like, oh, poor thing. You didn't deserve the role you were in.
Yeah, that it looks pretty terrible, and it's sad because it's kind of neat too, because it's also based on like, it's another example of like Pokemon being inspired by real world biology. In the story, young Goose and Gumshoos were introduced to Alola to deal with the Rattata population, and that's why
basically mongooses.
Yeah, how mongooses were introduced to Hawaii to deal with the rat population. But what ends up happening in both is that the Rattata became dark types and basically switched to living a nocturnal lifestyle. In real life, it was that mongooses are diurnal and rats are nocturnal, so they just never interacted.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they ended up becoming two separate invasive species.
Because I know you only run into young goose in the daytime and Rattatas at night.
Yeah. And in both...
That's actually another thing I wanted to bring up. Sun and Moon are on different clock schedules, right?
Yeah.
Yep, Sun is normal time, Moon is flip 12 hours.
Yeah, it's kind of sad because I've got Moon and I can't ever get to see the beautiful sunsets that are in the series that look gorgeous, but I would have to...
I see them plenty for you.
Yeah.
Well, you could set your alarm for like 6 a.m. one day and check it out.
It gets dark at 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. like 6. That's when it becomes day or night.
So it's got to be like 5:30.
Yeah. On the other hand, though, there's also a secret mechanic where you can temporarily like switch the clock to normal time.
But that's
by, Yeah, that's post game.
Okay. So I guess you're not. Have you guys beaten the game yet, or are you
I
guys?
have. I'm just starting on the post game Ultra Beast quest, where you seek out the Ultra Beasts and capture them.
And I finished
Yeah.
that yesterday.
So Stoneheart, where are you in the game?
So very like, what I was doing right before 4 o'clock or so was I finished off the Elite Four.
Congrats.
And so I just got to the post game stuff. I haven't gotten the chance to start any of it. But yeah, that's where I am.
Okay, so that's nice. So all of you have beaten the game and can speak.
Yeah, we've all seen the credits.
In general.
Actually, that makes me kind of wonder. What was everyone's Pokemon team when they fought the Elite Four? Like their main partner team. Mine was Decidueye. That's the grass starter. It's a ghost type archer.
It's an owl.
An owl. I named it Ferninator. A wizard. That was my Alolan Raichu. It's part psychic this time and rides on its own tail like a surfboard. Ribombi, which is this adorable little like bee sprite. I named her Buzzer. Johnny Cash. That was the name I gave my Mudsdale, which is a dreadlocked Clydesdale horse.
The draft horse.
Yeah. The Flare. That was my Salazzle. They're an interesting species. They're salamanders whose poison is so corrosive, it can poison other poison types or steel types, which are otherwise immune to poison. And only the female members of the species evolve. And then finally, I had the Astra Ninja from the demo.
Nice.
So,
That didn't have a nickname because you can't nickname the Pokemon that you get in a trade.
Yeah, I'll do mine then. I also had the grass starter. It's the first time I've had the grass starter. I'm normally a fire type for life, but I love that grass elf so much. Anyway, Decidueye I named Artemis because she unexpectedly turned up female. Woohoo! Not that it matters with Ditto, but it's always nice. Oh, my team was entirely female. Just it happened to happen that way. It's great.
Oh, that's neat.
Yeah.
I don't think that's
I didn't know that Pokemon had genders aside from Reno and Rena.
They included that in Gold and Silver for a breeding mechanic to make it so you didn't lose out if all of your friends evolved their starters, so your Pokedex could be completed. But they made it so that some of the Pokemon are more statistically likely to be male, so it's harder to get to breed them.
Yeah, starters have an 87.5 chance of being male.
Yeah.
As opposed to a normal 50-50 split. Not that it matters much anymore because you can use Ditto to breed with anyone because Ditto just copies them.
It does mean that if you want to get your starters to have egg moves, it's a little bit more of a pain. But that's going into way more.
That's the competitive seed.
Yeah.
But back to my team real quick. I also had a Mudsdale, which is the giant ground type draft horse. It's like a truck. Her name was Clara. Just cute. Evolved from a donkey that was kind of ridiculous looking, but I loved anyway. And Alolan Ninetales. Unlike the regular Vulpix and Ninetales, which are fire types, the Alolan Vulpix is ice type and evolves into ice fairy type. It's cute as hell.
That's why Merve, it has 5 tails, not 9.
Oh.
But then it's not named correctly.
I mean, I think it has 5 tails anyway.
I gave her a nickname anyway. Her name is Caitlin.
That's a nice one.
I named her after a Flash character.
Oh, like Caitlin Snow?
Yeah. She's cute. Oh, geez, who else is on my team? I'm forgetting. Why can't I remember? I should have opened my DS. Oh, the Bug/Steel Pokemon, Vikavolt.
It's Bug Electric, sorry.
Bug Electric, you're right. Which I named They. I don't remember why. I think I was running out of ideas for nicknames. That's the one I stuck with. Slow, but has a really high special attack stat. I also had a Salazzle, which Wolfman had the Fire, Poison, Salamander, because I normally have a Fire starter when I'm used to Fire teams. And, oh my god. Beware, one of my favorite Pokemon this generation. It's a normal/fighting Pokemon. It's a giant pink bear that evolves from Pokemon called Stuffle that looks like a stuffed animal. It has an ability called Fluffy, which halves damage to it from physical attacks, but it makes it super weak to fire. It's
Or
amazing.
moves with direct contact. Or is it moves with direct contact, or is it all physical moves? Yeah, Beware is great. It's like based on like one of those Toku Japanese mascots, the ones with the really like simple heads. But like it's supposedly still a bear, so it's so strong it can rip people in half. And
Her name is Fluffy, and I love her.
oh no, yeah, they're great. They're super creepy and super cute and super hilarious.
They're adorable.
And they're really
So,
strong.
yeah, they have like a truck. So that was my Elite 14. All nicknamed, all taught by me.
And Stoneheart, who is on your team?
So there's a bit of overlap. I also went with the grass starter. So I had Decidueye. So I named all of my like the guys I used for most of the game. I named them after D&D classes and prestige classes. So I had Ranger, the Decidueye. I had Druid, the Ribbon Bee, who Wolfman mentioned that he had. It's a bee, and it's a bug fairy type, and it gets this move called Quiver Dance, which gives it a nice little boost to like its special attack, its special defense, and its speed. So all around, I really liked using him, and I think he might be my favorite. My favorite new one introduced. I also used the Alola version of Raichu, who sits on his own tail. I think his name was Warlock. And then to things not used by Wolfman and Operetta, I had Aerodactyl that I called Paladin, who, even though I only used Aerodactyl like in like the original Red version, so it's nice to see that he's gotten quite a few new toys to play with in the past 20 years. Then I used this one. I'm not entirely sure what kind of monkey it's based off of, but there's this fighting type monkey that's called Passimian, and he's based off some.
It's a
he has a melon thing that that sort of looks like it could be used as like a ball in a sport.
Yeah, it's like a soccer player.
Yeah, it's a rugby lemur, and
Rugby. Okay.
Oh,
yeah. And it's a ruffled lemur, like it's a rugby monkey, and its counterpart is a wizard orangutan. In Moon, they're based on the different versions. So the Moon one, you have the orangutan, and in Sun, you get the rugby monkey. They're pretty cool.
And then so his name was Monk. And then finally I got another one of the Sun exclusive Pokemon. It's called it has a weird name, Turtonator.
Turtonator.
Yeah, Turtonator. And he's this fire dragon turtle, who has like all of these spikes on his back. And he actually gets his own he gets his own signature move where if you use the move, it's called Fire Trap, Shell Trap, where if anyone hits him with like I can't remember if it's a physical attack or a contact attack, but there's a lot of overlap, so it doesn't make a huge difference. But if he gets hit with a physical attack, the trap goes off and it does a massive amount of fire damage. And I named him Defender because I couldn't fit in Dwarven Defender, and it also would be weird if I put Dwarven in there. So
it's also historically based on the Matamata turtle, which is a very ugly turtle.
Also, the champion fight was really fun. It's the most fun champion fight I've had in ages.
It was super difficult, and I loved it.
That too, I almost died. It was great. I have a thing called. Sorry,
I lost once and had to reset to train my team because they were like 10 levels low. but it ended pretty great. Almost everyone on the team got to do something.
Yeah, it's always good when there's variety. I have this thing called I played so many Pokemon games. I try not to reuse Pokemon that I've used in the past, unless it's a remake. Like Omega Ruby was me using a lot of my team from the original Ruby when I played way back when. Except now I'm way smarter about how I play Pokemon. I'm not a dumb person. I'm not the person I was when I was like 12, who only had like fire moves in my fire Pokemon.
Yes, that gives you some flexibility.
Yeah.
When you're fighting them off.
We're all smarter Pokemon players than we used to be.
Yeah,
We've all grown up.
Yeah.
And speaking of growing up, nowadays we've all grown up with Pokemon. Now there are kids growing up with Pokemon.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think the franchise is going to do next for those kids?
That's a good question. I feel like generally Pokemon is very good at like. I think the reason why it's managed to generally succeed, and even though I think the franchise isn't capturing as many like younger people as before, it's still doing pretty well in that regard. But I think a lot of it is that the things that make Pokemon compelling to the people who play it, that I'm counting myself in this, is that it is able to capture this idea of like exploration and of learning and of communicating. Because every part of the game is based on that. Like, you explore to find more Pokemon. To learn, you find more Pokemon. Pokemon are used to fight your friends and to like, do something with them. They're used for all these different things. And I think what we're going to probably see is just more evolutions and more permutations of this idea. And every Pokemon game does this. Like, they'll have a new mechanical system or a new way to trade or a new way to play with your friends, and sometimes they'll be used again and sometimes they'll be thrown away after one like generation. But I think we're going to see they're going to be something that like tries to do that to emphasize the connectivity.
Yeah, I think it seems like they've found a format that they like, and they've more or less stuck with it over. I don't know how many generations they've done now. Several generations. 7. Okay, 7 generations of Pokemon. So they've stuck with a very similar format, and they've just sort of refined that formula. One rumor has it that there's going to be, now that Nintendo's coming out with their new console, the Switch, that's both a handheld / home console hybrid, there's a rumor that we're going to finally get a full-fledged Pokemon game that's playable on a home console.
Yeah, Pokemon. Supposedly it will be called Pokemon Stars.
Yeah, that's the rumor I've heard as well. How do you feel about that? Do you think Pokemon should stay handheld, or are you excited to see it move into the home console space?
I mean, I think it's always going to be... It's been on home consoles before. There were the Pokemon Coliseum games, which I played both of.
Yeah,
there's like Pokemon Coliseum, Pokemon Snap. They had those. Those home console games, but to see like a full-fledged, like
Pokemon
legit
normal.
Pokemon entry.
Oh, I know.
Also, Pokken Tournament, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's like a Pokemon fighting game.
It's by the people who did Tekken, so it's not technically a crossover, but it's like it's an ideological crossover where Pikachu fights like Heihachi.
Okay, yeah, that's neat that they've managed to do all these spin-offs. Most of them have been handheld, like Pokemon Pinball and all those games. But it's nice to see they've got some home console ones as well.
I think with the home console thing, I mean, they've been very open that like they see it as predominantly a handheld thing, and I don't really blame them. The series has always been based around this idea of like you can pick it up and you can do it wherever. Like you go to your friend. Like there's a physicality, I think, to the idea of moving with the controller.
And they took that to its logical conclusion with Pokemon Go.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think, I'd like to see a Pokemon Stars, if only because, like, seeing Sun and Moon, but in glorious HD, could be pretty exciting. I mean, Alola is a gorgeous environment.
Yeah, they've really kicked up the art direction a notch, for sure. So what sort of mechanics do you want to see in future mainline entries in the franchise?
literal being able to run around in someone else's game co-op.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Yeah, that sounds like
I mean,
it could be interesting.
Yeah,
mean,
we
they
already have internet trading, so.
We also now have like riding around on your Pokemon, which I think was something everyone wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can just like hop on the back of a
Well,
Rapidash and
It's not every Pokemon, but like they're instead of the HMs, they have the ride system where you can, like, instead of the bike, you ride on a Tauros. Instead of Surf, you ride on a Lapras or a Sharpedo. Instead of Strength, you ride on a Machamp, and it literally carries you around in two of its arms while the other two move blocks.
yeah, that's they've always had that sort of thing in the anime where, Ash rides around on Pokemon or what have you, but it's never really been in the game. So it's almost like they're taking elements of the show that they couldn't implement in the game because of technological limitations, and now that those limitations have been lifted, they're finally taking that inspiration back into the game and making it possible.
I believe that is very much like a lot of it. Really, you know what? It feels in some ways kind of like the manga. This iteration, like this notion of like we're going to imagine a society that like how this society interacts with these creatures. You guys,
Yeah.
mean like just like
I know what you mean, for
like,
sure.
you see these constant like examples of like here's this Pokemon and like it's living in the town and they're like helping build this boat or whatever, and it's like this. It feels like there's constantly these little like information about like how these people like kind of all work to this society operates.
Yeah, it seems like they've really thought hard about how, having these creatures running around would impact society in all these subtle ways. I think what they've done a really good job of doing is portraying it as something normal. Like it's just an everyday part of people's lives that, there are people riding around on Tauros, and that's just completely it's a completely normal everyday occurrence.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've covered what we want to see next in terms of the mainline series. Are there any other media you think Pokemon should expand to? I mean, we've got movies, TV, manga, trading cards. Is there anything else you want to see Pokemon in?
Well, we're gonna get the movie with they are fully doing the Great Detective Pikachu as the first live action Pokemon movie. And it's going to be co-written by Nicole Perlman, who wrote Guardians of the Galaxy, and Alex Hirsch, who's the co-creator of Gravity Falls. And it's
so they've got some real talent.
Well,
behind
I mean,
the pen.
not entirely. The director is the guy who did the Goosebumps movie.
That I heard was not totally terrible.
And to be fair,
Too,
yeah. I mean, and to be fair, there's only so much like a director can change with a Goosebumps movie. So I have never actually, I have to admit, I've never actually seen it. So I just heard those.
I don't think many people have actually seen it.
Yeah. Still, I mean, that would be fun, even if they don't get Danny DeVito to play Detective Pikachu, as the fans petitioned.
Oh, we want it. We want it so much. Yeah, so we're getting that new movie. Anything else you guys want to see on the horizon for Pokemon?
Nothing off the top of my head. I gotta pick up one of those cute plushies of Rowlet at some point.
I want a Mimikyu doll that is just a Pikachu doll, but that's haunted.
Where is the Mimikyu merchandise? It has to happen.
I think there is. There is no way they don't have Mimikyu merchandise ready.
It's gotta come on. I mean, I haven't looked, but I'm sure it exists.
Yeah, I mean, even more than normal Pokemon. Like they know that one.
My other favorite little unloved thing.
I mean,
yeah, it seems like
you know what?
I haven't seen all that much new generation Pokemon merchandise. It's something we should really take advantage of.
I mean, they do.
Just come out.
Yeah, they have like the starters and Mimikyu and maybe like a Rockruff, plus the legendaries. They'll probably have more as it goes on, and people realize how great Drampa is.
Yeah, eventually they'll end up on T-shirts anyway. So
one thing I was thinking of, it's not exactly a new medium, but I'd like to. We talked about like the notion of this kind of people living in this environment. And I'd really love it if there was another game kind of about that. Like, I'd love to see a game that was less about the battle system, which I love and I think is absolutely fantastic, but like a game with totally different mechanics that was about living in this environment. I don't know how that would work exactly, or even
So,
what
like,
genre it'd be, but
Telltale Pokemon, almost.
yeah, or really anything. Like, I would be cool with like a crazy platform game where you play as like a Charizard and you slowly learn how to fly or whatever. Um, or you could have a weird kind of Metal Gear Solid-y thing where you play as Greninja and you kind of sneak around like different kinds of towers and caves.
I think that would be actually an awesome spin-off to bring to a Nintendo home console, right?
Yeah.
Like a stealth game as a Pokemon or a platformer as a Pokemon, because it's almost a tragedy that there are all these games where you play as a human in this world where there are so many creatures. I want to play as a creature.
Well, that's what the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon is, but that's still like an RPG Mystery Dungeon game. And
You're
I
still
think
a human, just as a set of
Pokemon, yeah. I think a lot of this Merve is kind of the appeal of is one of the big secret appeals of Pokemon. It's this like this basically everyone in who has even a passing interest in Pokemon can potentially find a Pokemon that is perfect for them. Like there were Pokemon that I loved, and then in Gen 4 they came out with Weavile, which was the evolved form of Sneasel from Gold and Silver, and that became my favorite Pokemon. And then they came out with Greninja, which became like my other favorite Pokemon. Like you're always gonna find something that like speaks to you and your tastes so perfectly and acutely. And I think like so if you kind of like and I think a lot of this genre, like the idea of games being different genres is part of that.
Yeah, I really like that there are so many of these Pokemon out there that everybody can find one that fits their personality and they can really latch onto it. I think that comes from having that many monsters, right? You
Yeah.
know, people thought initially 150 is a lot of monsters. Well, that in a sense turned out to be a brilliant marketing tactic
Yeah.
because it means that there's a Pokemon for everyone.
It's
Mhm.
also
And
pretty compelling because the thing is the Pokemon have to be the characters who are designed the best. Like generally when you make a game, you have like your main character and like the people who appear the most, and they take up like the majority of like the design focus. And then you have like the secondary characters who get less effort because that makes sense. They're less important. But in Pokemon, while some Pokemon clearly get more effort and focus than others, every Pokemon
yeah,
has
Pidove didn't get that much effort. Let's be real.
oh yeah, Pidove, yeah. But the thing is, every Pokemon has to be designed with the knowledge that it will be someone's favorite, and that's not like a may. If you go around, you can probably find fan clubs for every single individual Pokemon.
Like a Greninja subreddit, I'm sure it
Oh,
exists.
there's
Greninja is
Pokemon.
very popular.
Yeah, Greninja's actually there was like a poll in Japan, and Greninja last this year, and Greninja was the winner of the poll.
Oh, okay. I wasn't aware that Greninja was so popular. Again, wasn't he in Super Smash
It
Brothers?
was.
One of them.
Yeah.
It was, and he's great in Smash Brothers.
Is he in
He's my
Super Smash
favorite
Brothers
character.
U, the most recent one?
Yeah.
Okay, not Brawl.
No.
Obviously.
He
Yeah.
well, the thing is that Greninja was literally released like people only knew about it in 2013 when the games came out because there was a like when the games were given to reviewers, there was actually like a stipulation that they couldn't reveal the X and Y starters' final forms because I think they wanted to like build up them as a secret. But by that time they absolutely knew Greninja was going to be in Smash, so it's sort of like its popularity kind of slowly built up.
Okay, so it's some brilliant marketing on Nintendo slash Game Freak's part for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
But
yeah,
like but yeah, that Pokemon was very, very successful. There's Lucario, which is sort of like the series Wolverine, in the sense that it's super popular and it's also like a very good marketing success. It's a Jackal Knight that uses Hadoukens.
ooh,
It's
yeah,
also in
and
Super Smash Brothers.
Yeah, there are a lot of Pokemon that the people really get attached to.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
there's literally a subreddit for Goomy. Goomy is a dragon-type slug that has a really adorable, ridiculous dork smile, and it's like just this weird little slug ball thing, and it's great because it's so goofy looking, but it literally has like a huge fan community just for Goomy. And part of
yeah,
the joke, but people they genuinely like it. Every single Pokemon, you can find like people who are super into just that one.
yeah, and you can find some people who are like creepily into Gardevoir
Yeah,
as well.
yeah. Actually, if we're being fair, anyone. Even more lol, the moral mushroom that turns into a giant shiitake mushroom that can hypnotize people.
Yeah, people latch on to weird things sometimes. So is there anything else you guys are interested in seeing in the Pokemon franchise's future?
More games that I keep
More
having
games?
fun with.
I think
Yeah.
certain regions would be interesting. Germany, Australia, New Zealand, Swaziland. Like,
I want Pokemon Australia.
yeah,
Yeah, they haven't done Africa or
Africa.
Central Asia or
Yeah, and they've
I,
only done Europe once.
Yeah.
yeah. Sorry, Stoneheart, you were saying?
oh, sorry. I was just gonna say like they so like the first like up to Diamond and Pearl, like all of the regions were based off like some part of Japan, and then and so like this and then so fifth the Black and White were based off America, but specifically I think like New York, New Jersey.
Yeah, it's
New
New
York
York
City.
City and New Jersey. You can
Yeah.
actually it's great. There's a place based on Newark that has an airport.
Oh, that's what that
That's
was.
the only worthwhile thing in Newark.
I mean, there's also a really great Portuguese place that has this delicious paella.
This is like a restaurant and an airport. Yeah, so I think expanding geographically is what I want to see as well. I want to see Pokemon go global in its setting for sure.
Cambodia.
That would be wonderful. I would love to see Southeast Asia Pokemon sort of thing. Yeah, and I think with that, we'll bring this podcast to a close. This has been a very interesting and illuminating discussion for a Pokemon novice like myself to get involved in.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, Lord Stoneheart, Operetta, Wolfman Jew, for being on the podcast today.
I hope we did not overwhelm you.
Oh, trust me, Pokemon has always been sort of overwhelming to me. You didn't make it any more overwhelming. Don't
And
worry.
we didn't even talk about the competitive scene. No, I'm joking.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, how do you think Talonflame's gonna work now that Gale Wings has been nerfed? I'm kidding. I don't care.
I have no idea what any of that means. But we should talk about the competitive scene in gaming in general on a subsequent podcast one day. So thank you all for joining me. And just as a reminder to our listeners, if you want to keep up to date with the podcast, you can check out avocadogamescast.tumblr.com and follow us there and read link dumps that fact check all the nonsense we say on the podcast.
Yeah, I'm gonna
Again, thank
send
you
you
all for
Merve
being
a
here.
bunch of stuff.
Pardon me?
I'm gonna be sending you just like 10 links in about 2 minutes.
Yeah, just bombard me with images, dump them all in the link dump. Our listeners can look at them, and it'll be wonderful. So, good night, everyone. And thanks
Good
for
night.
being here.
Good
Thank you
night.
for having us.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.
See you guys.